Lübeck, May 5, 1980. A mother's reality was torn apart. Young Anna skipped class, winding up at the home of 35-year-old butcher Klaus Grabowski. Grabowski was a known criminal, previously convicted and even surgically castrated during an earlier sentence. Yet, hormone shots allegedly reversed what the surgeons had taken away. Anna was found dead. Dumped in a box near a canal, she had been strangled with hosiery. He confessed after his partner snitched, but his trial testimony would ignite absolute chaos. By early 1981, Grabowski's courtroom lies drove Miriam to the edge. He claimed the child tried to blackmail him with lies. He played the victim. Watching this farce while her child was slandered, Miriam snapped. On March 6, 1981, Miriam entered the courthouse carrying a deadly secret. She had hidden a .22 caliber Beretta in her belongings. Security was lax then. German courts did not use metal detectors yet. Mid-trial, she rose and emptied 8 rounds into Grabowski's back. 7 bullets struck home, most of them tearing into the killer's spine. As guards tackled her, she screamed that he had murdered her baby. She called him a pig, wishing him dead, then peacefully surrendered. She never ran, finishing her work before judges and stunned lawyers alike. The courtroom was now a crime scene, the gun previously stashed in her purse. This was premeditated. She bought the gun and brought it to finish him. Marianne's own trial lasted 28 days in 1983. Murder charges were eventually dropped to manslaughter due to her immense grief and his provocations. The verdict: intentional killing plus illegal possession of a firearm. While English media called it manslaughter, the judge noted her intent but gave a light sentence for her trauma. She got 6 years, serving only 3 before winning probation. Germany was absolutely stunned by the outcome. Polls showed people found the sentence either just or overly harsh. Many saw a mother pushed too far by a failing legal system. Others feared the precedent of bloody courtroom vigilantism. She sold her story to Stern for $158,000. Did she ever feel regret? In 1995, she stated she killed him deliberately to silence his vile lies. Her careful consideration proved this was not just a sudden fit of rage. A psychiatric note read, "For you, Anna," bordered by 7 drawn hearts. Marianne died of cancer in 1996, aged 46, buried with Anna. In death, they were finally together again. The case still sparks debate about vigilante justice and the limits of the law. Her story echoes through legal seminars today. It remains a documentary staple. Our next case crosses borders for 30 years. July 9, 1982. 14-year-old Kalinka died at her stepfather's home. Dieter Krombach was a heart doctor, a man meant to heal. He had injected her with cobalt ferlecet, claiming it was for anemia or tanning. A sleeping pill followed. By morning, her life had slipped away. Her father, André, lived in France, long divorced from her mother. A father's instinct flared when the news of his girl's end felt like a hollow lie. Vibrant teens don't just vanish after routine shots. Post-mortem scans whispered a much darker truth. Kalinka's skin bore puncture wounds in locations no legitimate medical professional would ever target. Coroners spotted internal trauma, a chilling sign that the doctor's account was masking a brutal assault. Her lungs were choked with bile, proving she had suffocated while trapped in a drug-induced stupor. A strange, pale residue remained on her body. Yet investigators inexplicably ignored the sample. Though Berlin's initial probe faced backlash for overlooking that vital biological trace, French experts later scrutinized the data, identifying the fluid as DNA evidence of a predatory attack. Despite these glaring red flags, German police shuttered the file without making a single arrest. Top doctors blamed the lethal cocktail. Yet the legal machine in Germany remained frozen. To André Bamberski, this silence was a betrayal. He vowed to hunt for the truth himself. He launched a crusade that would eventually swallow 27 years of his existence. He flooded the man's neighborhood with flyers, exposing grisly autopsy notes and screaming murderer. Why would a heart specialist pump a healthy girl full of iron she clearly didn't need? The physician retaliated by dragging the grieving father into court for defamation. Defeated in court and silenced by law, Bamberski simply took his battle underground. He drained his wealth on international legal teams, stalking his prey across 2 separate borders. Retribution became his only fuel. He lived only to see his enemy in chains. Can sorrow beat a system? Paris eventually held a trial with an empty defendant's chair. Since Kalinka was one of theirs, France handed down a 15-year sentence for her needless end. Yet, the killer remained a ghost, never stepping foot inside a prison cell. By 2001, European judges wiped his record clean, citing technical errors in the trial. He hid in plain sight in Germany, shielded by laws that forbade his return to France. 27 years had bled away. Bamberski knew the window for justice was slamming shut. With the law failed, he chose a desperate gamble to force the monster onto French soil. He paid 19,000 euros to have the doctor snatched from his German sanctuary. A trio of mercenaries brutalized the target, cracking his skull during the violent extraction. They smuggled his broken body across the border, leaving him bound outside a police precinct. Authorities caught Bamberski nearby, the blood money for the job still tucked in his pockets. Freed on bail, the father smiled. His quarry was finally trapped in a French courtroom. Caught in the French net, the doctor faced his sins in 2011 and lost. Judges gave him 15 years, a verdict that stuck even after his final appeal. For the abduction, Bamberski received a mere 1-year suspended term in 2014. He proudly admitted to the snatching, driven by a singular, haunting purpose: vengeance. 30 years of silence were over. His decades-long hunt screamed louder than any words. For 27 years, he never doubted the doctor had poisoned his little girl's life. Dying and frail, the killer was freed in 2020, only to perish months later. The father remains in France today, a man who finally found peace. This saga laid bare the fractured reality of seeking justice across European borders. It proved a father's love knows no law when nations fail to protect their own. Other horrors unfold in a heartbeat, frozen forever by the cold lens of a camera. Gary Plauche's nightmare began with a karate teacher in the heart of Baton Rouge. He wore a guardian's mask, embedding himself deep within their trust. Beneath that deception, he was inflicting unspeakable horrors upon their boy. On February 19, 1984, Doucet snatched Jody, fleeing into California, a grave federal violation. For days, he haunted an Anaheim motel room with the boy. The cruelty persisted. Jod finally reached a phone. Panic gripped his home. Police traced the signal. On February 29th, Doucet was finally cornered. Gary Plauche knew his son was safe, but the nightmare had only just begun. Extradition to Louisiana loomed. The date was set: March 16th, 1984. Deuce would touch down at Baton Rouge's airport under heavy guard for his formal day in court. Gary Poach lurked in the terminal, masked by a hat and lenses to remain a shadow. He staked out a strategic vantage point near a bank of airport payphones. A local cameraman might have whispered the schedule, though no proof of that leak surfaced. As police marched Deuce through the crowd, news crews rolled, hungry for the evening broadcast. No one realized they were filming a historical execution rather than a routine transport. Plauche emerged from his position. He leveled a .38 revolver. One bullet pierced Deuce's skull at point-blank range. The thunderous shot echoed as live TV watched. Deuce hit the floor. Within 24 hours, the kidnapper's life was over. Officers tackled Plauche instantly. He spat back. "If it were your kid, you'd do it too." Those words became a rallying cry. The case ignited a firestorm across the entire state. The state pushed for second-degree murder, a charge carrying a potential life sentence. However, the public's outcry was both swift and overwhelming. Neighbors hailed him as a hero, flooding the DA's office with cash and legal support. The question remained: should a father be destroyed for erasing his son's tormentor? The court's decision rested on the dark evaluation of his mental state. Experts probed Plauche, deciding he'd succumb to a fleeting, violent break from reality. Counsel argued the agony of his son's violation stripped away all rational self-control. Psychiatric testimony painted a picture of a fractured mind in the days before the shooting. Plauche accepted a manslaughter plea, a significant reduction from the initial murder charge. The judge's ruling stunned legal observers. 7 years, entirely suspended. He walked away with 5 years of probation and 300 hours of community service. Despite an execution on live television before police, he never spent a day in jail. Was it justice or mercy? Public devotion to him remained unshakable throughout the ordeal. To the local community, he was simply a parent doing what any father would crave. As an adult, Jody Play grappled with the legacy, writing Why Gary Why? The title mirrored the haunting ambiguity he felt regarding his father's violent choice. Gary Play passed in 2014, carrying zero remorse to his grave. In every interview, he maintained he'd pull the trigger again in the same dark moment. Legal scholars still dissect this collision of parental rights and the written law. It remains the ultimate study in temporary madness and the scales of emotional justice. That airport footage remains a chilling, widely seen portrait of a father's law. Millions still watch, fueling the eternal debate over justice, vengeance, and protection. But what if that flash of violence strikes inside a courtroom gallery? Enter Ellie Nestler. Daniel Driver, a counselor with a dark past, had hidden his prior sins in California. Red flags should have barred him from kids, but he slipped through the system's cracks. By 1988, 5 boys, including William Nestler, had detailed his monstrous acts. Their accounts led to an April 2, 1993 hearing at the Jamestown Superior Court. Ellie Nestler, William's mother, sat in that courtroom, waiting for the scale to tip. A shadow hung over her, a spiraling addiction to the crystal ice that would eventually serve as the centerpiece of her legal gamble. Driver sat waiting for the judge, unaware Ellie was already reaching deep into her bag. Out came the cold steel she'd smuggled in. 5 thunderous rounds tore through Driver's skull, silencing him forever before a horrified audience. Bedlam broke loose. Guards surged forward, pinning Ellie down as the iron shackles snapped shut. The identity of the shooter, the deed, and the reason were chillingly obvious to everyone. Every eye had seen the blood. Soon, the country was locked in a fierce debate over her fate. The state demanded a murder conviction, claiming cold-blooded intent since she'd arrived armed and ready to kill. Those repeated shots screamed of vengeance, not a desperate act of self-preservation. Lawyers painted her as a mother possessed by primal fury, her mind warped by a haze of narcotics. They depicted a broken soul driven to madness by the unspeakable horrors Driver inflicted upon young William. 12 jurors chose manslaughter, sparing her from the weight of a first-degree murder verdict. In 1993, she vanished behind bars to begin a 10-year stretch for her crime. 3 years in, her chains broke when evidence of a tainted jury surfaced in 1996. A juror named Loren Tolkis had hidden her own past trauma and whispered of Ellie's guilt long before the trial ended. Was she truly free? The road to a new trial quickly became a legal minefield for her. While out on bail, she was caught with contraband and unregistered iron, shattering her image of a grieving mother. The state claimed her ongoing habits revealed a lifestyle of reckless choices, not a solitary moment of madness. Fearing a stricter fate, she signed away her rights in a desperate plea agreement. She admitted to the killing and took a 6-year term to run with her other legal woes. Society remained fiercely split through both courtroom dramas. To many, she was a fierce guardian who broke after discovering the darkness Driver forced upon her boy. They hailed her as a vigilante who stepped in when the slow wheels of justice failed her child. Skeptics saw a high-stakes killer fueled by illicit chemicals, making her brand of justice impossible to excuse. A juror from the start later called the act a pure, cold-blooded execution. That chilling label perfectly mirrored the state's dark theory of the crime. By 2003, Ellie tasted freedom, though her body was already failing her from years of decay. A terminal diagnosis took root in her chest, aggressively spreading despite every effort to stop the clock. By December 2008, she was gone at just 56 years old. William remained, forever carrying the heavy ghost of a murder committed in his own name. Her story stands as a haunting landmark of a parent's bloody vengeance in the American justice system. It sparked hard questions about whether illicit habits can justify a plea of madness. It questioned if public pity can sway a verdict, and if a mother's rage ever excuses homicide. Her reliance on the glass pipe muddied the image of a mother acting on pure, holy love. It sparked debates over planning and sanity that continue to echo through history. Yet another story unfolds, this time involving a duo of desperate parents. These parents were Barry and Lupe. Deep in San Francisco, these two were fighting a losing war to save their girl from the abyss. Their child had fallen for Raymond Brooks, a predator they were certain was selling her soul for profit. Brooks was a shadow in the streets, a high-ranking player in the notorious and violent CDP gang. That neighborhood had long been haunted by violent street crews. The syndicate owned the streets, profiting from a web of illicit trades. As Brooks pulled the strings, the parents watched their daughter vanish into that criminal whirlpool. To them, Brooks was the poison, and they felt the police were just watching her die. They resolved to serve their own brand of cold, hard justice. Under a veil of secrecy, Gilton and Marcato finally triggered their long-simmering trap, cornering Brooks within the shadows of the Western Addition. With Gilton behind the iron, a hail of lead erupted from the passing shadow of their vehicle, a cold-blooded execution in motion. Riddled with bullets, Brooks collapsed as his life force ebbed away right there on the unforgiving pavement. The smoking gun emerged when ballistics tied the discarded brass to Gilton's piece, weaving a forensic web he could not escape. Murky underworld ties initially clouded the hunt for the truth behind Brooks's violent end, obscuring the trail in gang politics. Detectives first chased ghosts of turf wars, assuming this spray of gunfire was just another bloody chapter in the city's gang archives. Once the lens shifted to Brooks's private demons, the crosshairs swung away from the streets and locked onto Gilton and Marcato. Whispers turned into statements as locals began describing the ghost car that had haunted the scene that night. Shady rumors surfaced of the pair, whispering Brooks' name like a curse in the tense days leading up to the ambush. Digital breadcrumbs revealed a frantic flurry of calls between the parents, a countdown of signals in the hours before the hammer dropped. The fog finally lifted, ending in handcuffs for the couple as the state painted a chilling picture of a cold, calculated strike. This was no sudden flash of rage. It was a slow-burn conspiracy, meticulously forged over weeks of dark obsession. They'd armed themselves and spent nights stalking Brooks, learning his every rhythm like predators watching their prey. Seizing the perfect moment, they decided to erase the man they viewed as a lethal poison to their daughter's very existence. While in court, Gilton's dark history caught up to him with a racketeering conviction, independent of the blood on his hands from Brooks. Yet, when it came to the actual killing, the jury's verdict took a turn that left the courtroom breathless with shock. Following a decade of stalled justice and juries trapped in stalemate, the legal clock finally struck midnight for the accused. In April 2024, the gavel finally fell on Barry Gilton for the 2012 execution of Raymond Brooks. By 2026, he was rotting behind bars for 50 years to life, though Marcato faced a vastly different legal storm. She sat in the war room, a silent architect of the scheme, who knew exactly how the night would end in blood. Though her hands never touched the steel, her fingerprints were all over the preparations, earning her a grim accessory charge. Legal eagles claimed her silence was a weapon, arguing she was just as guilty for fueling the fire instead of dousing it. Their lawyers spun a haunting tale of two parents pushed to the absolute brink, acting out of sheer, raw desperation. They were portrayed as guardians with their backs against the wall, convinced their child was being hunted by a monster. Having pleaded for help from the law, only to be met with silence, they felt the clock ticking toward an inevitable tragedy. A deep sense of betrayal by the authorities left them feeling they were the only shield standing between Brooks and their family. A flicker of mercy showed in the jury's eyes, leading them to strike down the direct murder counts against the desperate mother. Yet the law demands blood for blood outside of self-defense, leaving Gilton staring down the barrel of a life sentence for conspiracy. For her part in the shadows, Marcato was handed a 15-year stretch, a heavy price for a mother's dark loyalty. This tragedy unmasked the terrifying crossroads, where a parent's primal protective instinct collides with the cold iron of the law. It exposed the rot of street life and the haunting choices made by those driven to the point of no return. Dark questions remain. How does a parent react when the system fails and a predator is circling their child's very soul? Today, Gilton dwells in a cell, the echoes of his choices haunting the quiet corridors of the penitentiary. Their downfall serves as a chilling warning that even the most righteous fury cannot escape the crushing weight of the justice system. Years may drift by, yet the hunger for vengeance can remain as sharp and cold as a blade in the dark. Deep in the heart of Coleman, Alabama, a man named Jay Mayer carried his own heavy burden. His daughter Julia had been shattered by a man named Raymond Brooks, a different ghost, but a name equally cursed with malice. This specific Brooks had been the boogeyman of Julia's youth, inflicting scars that time refused to heal. The trauma was a haunting parasite, poisoning her ability to connect and turning her world into a landscape of broken bonds. Trust was a foreign concept, and safety a forgotten dream, while her father Jay watched her light slowly flicker out. Every day, Jay witnessed the agonizing ripples of the damage Brooks had unleashed upon his girl's spirit. He saw the cracks in her soul and her desperate, fragile attempts to glue the shards of her life back together. Yet the thought of Brooks walking free, breathing the same air without a care, gnawed at Jay's soul like a starving wolf. For countless seasons, Jay nursed a cold, quiet fire of resentment while remaining the sole pillar of support for Julia. He stood by her side through every tear-soaked therapy session and every grueling step toward reclaiming her stolen peace. The thought of Brooks unpunished became a rot in his soul, haunting every waking hour. By June 23, 2014, Jay stopped waiting for fate and hunted Brooks down. Steel met sin. In a flash of lead, a decade of fury settled the debt. Handcuffs clicked before the smoke cleared. The evidence formed a roadmap of certain guilt. Cold steel spoke through forensics, while shadowy figures confirmed his presence in the gloom. Digital eyes tracked his vehicle through the darkness of that fateful area. He offered no lies to the law. He had simply run out of room. In court, they called him a hunter, claiming time had turned grief into cold-blooded strike. This wasn't some frantic explosion of emotion born from a fresh, bleeding wound. It was a slow-burn execution. Prosecutors detailed how he armed himself and stalked his target. His steps were those of a reaper with a plan, not a man lost to impulse. The defense spoke of a father's soul eroding as his child's light flickered and faded. They argued the years hadn't healed him. They let the poison sink into his bones. Experts dissected the invisible scars, left on those who watch their world shatter. They detailed the mental wreckage parents endure when their children are broken by another's hand. They portrayed a man whose world collapsed, leaving one dark path toward a hollow peace. Julia emerged from the shadows, her voice cutting through the heavy courtroom tension. She told reporters she would spill blood for her own children too. She stood by his desperate choice, while mourning the tangled, bloody knot they became. Her words shielded him, though she remained a prisoner of his legacy. Is restoration possible? As she bore the weight of his sacrifice, 12 strangers sealed his fate for the life taken. The gavel fell with 40 years, a grim price for his long-plotted vengeance. His prayers for mercy were met with the cold silence of the high bench. The law's decree was absolute. No matter the scars, the clock forbids a delayed strike. Jay Mayer now counts the seasons from behind the iron bars of an Alabama cell. Julia walks a lonely path, haunted by the past and a father lost to prison. She transformed her nightmare into a beacon for those drowning in similar dark waters. She strives to turn wreckage into a map toward peace that avoids further tragedy. This dark chapter reveals a piercing reality that echoes in the halls of justice. The hunger for payback never fades, yet the law never forgets the date. It leaves us wondering if the law has eyes for the eternal torment of victims, the thin line where the scales of balance meet the blade of spite, and if any soul's agony can excuse playing God once the storm has passed. The following mystery spans across borders, tangling lives in a web of conflicting powers. Deep in Arkansas, Aaron Spencer stood as a man of duty who wore the uniform. He traded the battlefield for the porch swing, seeking only the whispers of home. But a predator named Michael Fosler crept in, a shadow Spencer felt was poisonous. The dark specifics remain locked away, hidden behind legal seals and painful silence. Spencer's instinct screamed that a wolf was at the door, ready to devour his world. He watched the wheels of justice turn slowly while his child remained in peril. He felt abandoned by the badge, certain they were blind to the looming threat. On October 8, 2024, the veteran and the 67-year-old met on a rural road. Finding his girl in that man's car, a violent storm erupted between the two. In the struggle, he struck him repeatedly with lead. Under that sky, Fosler's life ebbed away. Medical examiners finished their grim task, yet the final report remains locked away. Authorities seized Spencer, booking him on a charge of murder. Shadows of doubt soon chilled Arkansas. Was he a guardian shielding his kin, or a cold seeker of vengeance, wearing a hero's mask? That haunting question held his fate, his military past becoming a focal point. Supporters whispered of his heavy sacrifice while in uniform, a soldier who understood the burden of protection, unlike any ordinary man. They saw a father cornered by a failing system that left his daughter vulnerable. In their eyes, he acted because the law simply moved too slow. But the state's attorneys told a far darker tale. They insisted no veteran status justified crossing that forbidden line into violence. Society has rules, paper walls like restraining orders meant to keep the peace. Police handle threats. Ending a life is only for when death is imminent. Then a twist. Spencer ran for sheriff, while still facing a homicide charge. This audacious move stunned the public and grabbed national headlines immediately. Could a murder suspect truly lead the very department that hunts criminals? His platform was built on the ruins of a shattered legal system. He shouted that the state abandoned his family in their darkest hour, and he would ensure others weren't forgotten. His followers surged forward with a fiery, desperate devotion. They saw a man who mirrored their anger toward a sluggish, procedural court. Would voters really hand a badge to someone who took the law? The maze deepened when a judge was removed over fears of tainted bias. This shakeup proved the case had become a political wildfire, making fairness difficult. Arkansas found itself split, the case acting as a volatile, polarizing spark. By January 2026, Aaron Spencer's trial is reaching its final, tense act. He is still hunting for the Lono County Sheriff's star, claiming his actions were necessary defense under the state's justification laws. If these dark tales intrigue you, join us by subscribing and ringing the bell. While Spencer fights in America, similar ghosts haunt families across distant borders. Consider the tragedy of Fatmir Terolari in the shadows of Greece. He lived every parent's nightmare, a predator lurking right within the family tree. It was his brother-in-law, a trusted man who broke every sacred bond. The wound was deep, a betrayal of blood and innocence combined into horror. In Albanian heritage, family honor is everything. Internal rot shatters their foundation. It wasn't just a crime. It was a stain on the entire lineage. Terolari found the pain intolerable. Specifics remained buried to protect the survivor, but the gravity convinced him that the courts were too weak for justice. He walked right into a confrontation with his relative. The events of that meeting are shrouded in conflicting whispers and half-truths. Some reports spoke of a desperate, violent scuffle in the dark. Others believe the end was written. When it finished, the relative lay dead. Arrested for murder, he ignited debates on ancient honor versus modern law. Deep within the old Albanian spirit, there lives a grim duty. A man must shield his blood and family name. Old world codes don't erase the law, but they haunt how these cases are judged. The state insisted that no matter the sin, he crossed a fatal, illegal line. They claim the land now answers to modern gavels, not ancestral blood echoes. Report the sin, they say. Yet the defense paints a picture of a mind gone dark. The defense has finally unmasked their strategy for the coming courtroom storm. They'll argue he was just a father pushed beyond the edge of human control. They plan to weaponize the sting of betrayal and the heavy weight of paternal duty. Can ancestral ghosts truly provide a valid legal shield? Whispers suggest if the state yields, mercy might find its way into the sentence. This implies a justice system that weighs the heart's darkness alongside cold statutes. The crushing toll of honor and the crime's nature will tip the final scales. The legal gears still grind toward the end. He sits in shadows while the public pulse beats with a strange, divided rhythm. Traditionalists mourn the man, while admitting the law must have its cold due. Yet others scream that blood vengeance has no place in a world of modern justice. This tragedy sparked a war between ancient ghosts and the light of tomorrow. It asks a haunting question. Does blood oath or modern law rule the soul? Advocates use this horror to demand better shields for victims trapped within families. Legal eyes watch, knowing this ripple will soon turn into a wave for future cases of this nature across Albania and the rest of the restless Balkan region. That jagged line between honor codes and modern order remains a haunting divide. His kin have vanished into a thick, unbreakable silence throughout the trial. The girl at the center of the nightmare remains a shadow, her voice unheard. They are trapped between a ruined past and the threat of a stolen future. Judgment hangs on the balance of cold intent versus the white-hot fire of betrayal. The mystery remains as the legal machinery refuses to yield its ending. But some who seek blood justice walk free witness the haunting tale of Jason Browning. In the Florida heat, he stumbled into a nightmare that rewrote his very soul. The horror was visceral. There was no time for calls, only the instinct to strike. Browning became the storm, raining fury down with his bare fists. The reckoning was brutal, leaving the intruder a broken, shattered shell of a man. Medical records later mapped the wreckage, written across the attacker's ruined body. But here the path twists. Browning dialed 911 the moment the fire faded. He didn't vanish into the night. He stood his ground and waited for sirens. That recorded 911 call remains a haunting echo of a father's raw account. Police arrived to find one man broken and a father standing in the silence. They uncovered the sickening proof of the sin that ignited the father's wrath. The truth was undeniable, though the father still found himself in cuffs for investigation. Authorities had to decide, was this a violent assault or a father's justice? The injuries were severe, but the reason was a parent's worst nightmare. Florida law offers a shield for those using force to stop a monster. Was his explosive wrath a measured shield or a step into the darkness? How much fury is allowed when a parent's child is the one being harmed? After peering into that void, the state refused to file any criminal charges. They ruled it protection. The violence died the second the threat was neutralized. Browning's fury froze right there. He chose to summon help rather than finishing the man. A wave of public approval met the choice to let the father go free. Many viewed his violence as a sacred shield for his own flesh and blood. If a father cannot strike to save his child, then the law is a hollow ghost. Folander, however, felt the crushing weight of the iron gates closing in. He was caged for his dark sins. The proof of his depravity was absolute. To avoid the light of trial, he confessed, earning 25 years in the dark. At the hour of judgment, the judge noted the father's strike but ruled the law had finally spoken truly. The monster was locked away. The father had only stood his ground. Browning later whispered of that day, certain his fast hand saved his boy's soul. He held no sorrow for the blood spilled, only pride for stopping in time. That sliver of restraint halting at the edge kept him from a prison cell. This grim tale became a ghost story for those debating a parent's right. It drew a sharp line between a guardian's fire and a murderer's cold heart. The frantic, racing pulse, the active scream of the moment, and his surrender to the law saved him. The son remains a nameless phantom. The family tries to outrun the memory. Browning now hunts the shadows, teaching others to see the monsters coming. This case stands as a chilling exception to those who ended in chains. The secret lay in the timing of the strike and the final response. He broke the threat, then called the guards. No plot, no final breath taken. He met the danger with force, then let the system take the lead. Other parents have turned their hollow grief into a much darker kind of hunt. In Mexico, Miriam Rodriguez became a phantom force for her stolen daughter, Karen. It wasn't chance. A plague of missing souls has haunted those lands for ages, driven by faceless syndicates who profit from the trade of human lives. Miriam followed every cruel demand, paying the ransom with a desperate heart. But Karen was a ghost. They had taken her soul despite the gold paid. The wolves never meant to release her. Most would have just withered away. They would have faded into mourning. But Miriam chose a sharper path. She became the shadow, hunting everyone tied to her daughter's cold end. Using masks and secrets, she drew close to the monsters in their dens. She mapped the underworld, learning the rhythms of those who walk in dark. She mastered the hunt, teaching herself the lethal secrets of the trade. Through years of silence, she cornered 10 souls stained by her girl's blood. She didn't pull the trigger. She wove a net of proof for the state. She did the work the broken and bought police were too afraid to do. In 2016, a hidden grave finally whispered the girl's final secret. The truth brought a haunting peace, yet her thirst for the others remained. Miriam shared the echoes of her dark mission with the world. "I died with her," she whispered, a mother's soul replaced by a seeking fire. She was a spirit of vengeance now, existing only to close the trap. But her light in the shadows made her a target for the pack. The syndicate she was tearing apart knew this mother was their death knell. They sensed her resolve was unbreakable. She'd never quit hunting them down, name by name. On Mother's Day, 2017, assassins pumped 13 bullets into Miriam, right on her San Fernando doorstep. The hit was a brutal attempt to bury her voice and terrify anyone else brave enough to follow. Her execution ignited a global firestorm, turning her into the face of a desperate parental uprising. She proved that even a single soul could rattle a syndicate, regardless of the lethal price tag. Today, her shadow looms large through haunting films, chronicling her relentless crusade. In the wake of Miriam Rodriguez's dark end, the law finally caught up with her killers, closing in on them during 2023 and 2024. Courts have since buried several cartel thugs in prison for snatching her child and ending Miriam's life. Yet, the blood-soaked streets of Mexico still whisper of a system where crime often walks free. Miriam's hands stayed clean of blood, yet her spirit haunts this archive as a beacon of maternal defiance. She turned a mother's agony into a detective's weapon, dismantling shadows from the inside out. Where the state failed, she became the storm, unstoppable, cold, and devastatingly precise. Her path forces us to ask, what's left when the law rots and parents must become the hunters? It draws a razor-thin line between a thirst for vengeance and the demand for a reckoning. While she played by the rules, she did the dirty work the bureaucrats were too scared to touch. But such a righteous path often leads straight to a premature grave. Challenging the underworld is a death sentence, a fact Miriam embraced until her final breath. Vindicating her stolen daughter mattered more to her than surviving the night. Her ghost now leads a quiet revolution of parents, refusing to wait for a system that never comes. The outcry she left behind forced the brass to finally acknowledge the epidemic of the disappeared. It's a legacy forged in grit, yet stained by the bitter truth that justice can cost a soul. Elsewhere, a grieving father chose the slow burn of reform over the quick flash of a gun. Deep in Mexico, Eduardo Gallo lived the same nightmare when Paola was snatched in the year 2000. He paid the ransom with trembling hands, clutching the hollow hope that money could buy her life. He waited for a homecoming that never happened. They took his cash and kept his child anyway. The betrayal was absolute, leaving a hole in his heart where his daughter used to be. While others might have reached for a weapon, Gallo reached for the truth. For 11 months, he stalked the shadows, piecing together a web that would eventually ensnare her captors. He ran a ghost investigation, a one-man operation moving in lockstep with the official files. His persistence cracked the case, forcing the very monsters he hunted to spill their secrets. One by one, those who tore his world apart were shackled and led away to their cells. He won his battle in court, but the fire inside him refused to burn out. He famously told the world his mantra was simple: justice, not revenge. Those 3 words were his North Star. He wanted to fix the machine, not smash it. Gallo transformed into a shield for others, a veteran of the war against kidnappers. He weaponized his trauma, guiding broken families through the same darkness he once walked alone. He dragged the kidnapping crisis into the light, demanding a world where no father has to pay for a corpse. From the podium to the picket line, his voice became a hammer striking for change. He became a mentor to the mourning, choosing the hard work of progress over the easy path of a feud. Word is, Gallo remains a sentinel in Mexico, still fighting the good fight against the snatchers. He walks free because he never stepped outside the boundaries of the law he tried to save. He handed the evidence over on a silver platter, letting the gavel do what his hands wouldn't. His story stands as a chilling foil to the Vigilantes, a man with every reason to kill who didn't. After a year of hunting the men who stole his daughter and his money, he chose a different ending. Their hideout and sins were no secret to him. Yet he leaned on the law's cold, steady hand. This decision unearths chilling doubts about how a shattered soul reacts to agony. Why do some trust the gavel while others crave blood? Is it a calm spirit or blind faith in the state? Do they weigh the risks? Gallo possessed the lethal grit to exact a dark vengeance had he truly desired it. Yet he refrained, carving a legacy that haunts the halls of power today. He guided countless broken homes through the shadowy labyrinth of abduction and fear. He reshaped Mexico's war on snatching, proving a ghost of a chance exists beyond pure, blinding hatred. Gallo and Rodriguez offer a haunting study in contrasts. Both hunted the shadows that stole their girls. Each spent years tracking the monsters, yet their final chapters couldn't have ended more differently. For Rodriguez, the hunt proved fatal when the very demons she unmasked finally silenced her forever. Gallo's restraint kept him alive, turning his scars into a beacon for other lost souls. Judging their choices is impossible. Both were driven by a terrifying love and a grief that swallows the sun. They demanded a reckoning from a machine that usually grinds the innocent into dust. Their divergent paths mirror unique spirits, twisted fates, and varying trust in the mirage of official fairness. Our journey ends back in the dim, neon-lit alleys of an American nightmare. Bokio Johnson, a simple New Orleans Sparky, lived for his two lights, Caleb and Brianna, before the dark came. During 2021, Hollis Carter snatched both children into the abyss. Files stay hushed on how Carter struck, yet the double void left Johnson's world a hollow, silent ruin. Police caged Carter for the killings. A judge spoke, a cell door slammed. The gears of law seemed to turn. On paper, justice won. Carter was destined to rot behind cold iron bars until his pulse finally stopped. Yet Bokio felt no peace. He spent months stalking his prey from afar, mapping the predator's movements within the steel maze. Patience fueled him until March 2022, when the grieving father finally struck his blow. Gun smoke cleared over Carter's corpse. The breach remains a mystery, but the lead in the body whispered Bokio's name. Cuffs rattled as the law branded Johnson a cold-blooded killer. Lawyers called it calculated spite, noting Carter was already buried alive in the state's deepest dungeon. The law held firm, but Bokio bypassed it, seeking a private blood debt from a man already discarded by society. His lawyers claimed no prison term could ever quiet the screaming silence of a man who lost everything. Moving on was a cruel, impossible lie. The thought of Caleb and Brianna's killer still drawing breath, even in a cage, was a poison he couldn't swallow. They depicted a shattered shell of a man, but the jury's hearts remained stone cold to his desperate plea. The verdict rang out. Guilty of snuffing out his children's murderer. It upheld the chilling rule. No matter the sin, unsanctioned death is murder, even when it feels like righteous fury. May 2024 saw Bokio buried under a 40-year term for taking Carter's life in the second degree. This heavy weight of years punished the chillingly planned nature of his final act. His kin watched, relieved the monster was dead, yet haunted by the permanent shadows still stretching across their home. Carter's death didn't resurrect the children. It only swallowed Bokio into the same iron belly that held his enemy. Their words echoed a grim truth. Vengeance is a hollow victory that never brings the dead back to life. It simply piles more grief. Now they mourn a triple loss, 2 children and a father locked away for 30 more years, with only a faint hope of appeal. While the finer points stay hidden, pundits doubt a win, citing his cold planning and the fact that Carter was already a caged bird when struck. The digital world erupted, with many weeping for Johnson and cursing a system that dared to put him on trial. Others warned that such blood justice would tear the very fabric of our civilization into tattered shreds. These virtual battles mirror ancient, haunting questions. Where does justice end and a father's madness begin? What makes this tragedy so piercing is that Carter was already rotting in a cell when Bokio struck. While most vigilantes strike when laws fail, Johnson waited until the state caged the predator. His choice wasn't born from legal failure, but a haunting thirst for personal finality. What chilling shadows truly dictate such a life-altering path? Is it righteous fury or a primal need to kill? Simply watching his enemy rot wasn't enough. He claimed that life by his own design, forfeiting 30 years of his liberty in exchange. The haunting echoes of his violence shatter everything left behind. A hollow home now faces decades of silence, mourning 3 souls, 2 stolen by malice, 1 by law. That cold emptiness didn't vanish when the killer died. Instead, the abyss only stretched wider. Our story concludes. We appreciate your time. Explore another mystery right here.